Hello and welcome to the Dojo, the marketing podcast where we turn stories into marketing tasks that you can do today to increase your marketing fortunes, get you more traffic, leads, sales, whatever it is you need to hit your revenue goals for this year. This week we're going to be joined by Gustavo, who's a content and branding strategist at Exposure Ninja. Hello, Gustavo.
Hey, hello. Thank you for having me.
It's actually a big delight and a bit of a milestone because my first encounter with you was actually you were handling the podcast for us and you used to upload it and take care of it and all that jazz back in
Yeah.
the day. So it's actually amazing to have you on the podcast now, all these years later. But I imagine our listeners don't know you as well as we do. So could you tell us what's your relationship to marketing?
Well, I'm the content and branding strategist at Exposure Ninja. I joined the company in, I think, right around the peak of the pandemic, 2020. My experience in marketing goes back to, so I first started for digital marketing. I started in about 2009, but around 2005, I was in radio, FM radio. So that's like music. Uh, and that's where I guess you could say I had my first brush with marketing, but it was mainly focused on radio ads, which is a completely different medium than what we do. So a lot of it was copywriting, working with sales to develop ad copy for radio adverts, and yeah. So then somehow that I transitioned to digital marketing in 2009, 2010, and at the time, uh, it was a very different environment because SEO is still this shiny new thing, and a lot of it was all the lines between black hat and white hat were very blurred. And I'll admit I did do some questionable things back then. So, but yeah, my I guess my relationship with it is with marketing at least is very. I guess the foundation of it is very academic, in that I follow the school of thought that businesses have basically two functions. Well, they have one overarching function. And this is again based on Peter Drucker's philosophy of businesses having one core function. That's to create a customer, and to do that, they have two functions: to innovate and to do marketing. So that's like the crux of my ethos around marketing.
Super. It's going to be really interesting to see how that bleeds into your story for this week. And perhaps you'd like to lead off and tell us what your heading is for this week.
Oh, so I will talk about Apple making a rare apology for their latest iPad Pro advert. So in May 8th, I guess in the UK, Apple released an advert for the new iPad Pro. So in the ad, if you have a look at it on YouTube, you search Crush. The advert's called Crush by Apple. And so in the advert, it starts out with these, I guess you could say, analog tools and instruments that are associated with the creative arts, things like trumpets, guitars, DJ turntables, vinyl record players, that sort of thing. And they're sitting under a this massive hydraulic press, and it slowly comes down and crushes these things, and it's a burst of color, and then the end of it, the end product of it is the iPad the iPad Pro. Sorry. So the idea is Apple has consolidated all of these things into the shiny new iPad. So they're calling it the thinnest iPad, the thinnest and most powerful iPad yet. On paper, it's a great concept. It's and I can see why it's a bit polarizing. But Apple's made a rare apology for the ad. A lot of Most of the critics have said that the ad is insensitive, especially these days. I mean, there are a number of reasons why this ad, I guess, failed. In Apple's words, they missed the mark. And it's interesting when we look back at these sort of adverts. There are a number of things that tend to come up. Why these sort of ads come out? They fail. Well, why the internal checks and balances fail to sort of read the room. But this one is interesting because Apple rarely makes an apology. In the time with Steve Jobs, they would not make an apology. If anything, Apple needs to apologize for the stupid keyboards they had in the first generation of Apple. When they refreshed the Apple MacBook Pro, I'm still salty about that. By the way, they brand new butterfly keyboard and it broke down in 2 years. I'm still very pissed about that, by the way. But so Apple made an apology after a bit of backlash, I guess, about how the ad was insensitive. But again, I'm endlessly fascinated by this sort of thing because on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being ooh and 5 being what the hell? This is like a 1 or 1.5, and I don't think it really warrants an apology for Apple, but it does. It's interesting because I think it's Apple's admission that they've sort of departed from their earlier image of like being a maverick brand. If you remember, like the 1984 ad in the 80s, that one directed by Ridley Scott, that's still to this day highly regarded as like the best ad of all time. So that was
For
like
those who, sorry to interrupt you, but for those who don't know, perhaps you could expand on what that ad is, because I imagine that some of the audience is, they're slightly older, and perhaps in our age groups, a younger audience may not know of
I
that ad that
dated
much.
myself. So yeah, Apple, in the early days of the Macintosh, Apple released this ad called 1984. It was directed by Ridley Scott. It was basically commentary on how on conformity, I guess you could say. It was very big. It was a reference to 1984, Big Brother, that sort of thing, controlling everyone's minds, people committing thought crimes, that sort of thing. And Apple was positioning itself as like, we're nonconformist, we're doing things differently, that sort of thing. It was very edgy, very stylish. And interestingly enough, I looked this up last week, when that ad came out, I forgot who the agency that came up with that ad was, but when they tested it with the folks group, it bombed, by the way. It was not well received. And so, but it just goes to show that if you want to, I mean, focus groups and customer testing and that sort of thing, they're not a panacea to this, to avoid problems with ads and tone deaf marketing. It's not a panacea or anything. It's a nice check and balance, but it's not like the be all and end all. But yeah, so at the time, Apple was positioning itself as a maverick brand. And so 1984 sort of like, that was like the big foray into the wider consciousness that, yeah, we're different. We're not like Windows, that sort of thing. We're Macintosh, we have a Macintosh. So that's like the underpinning like image or brand positioning for Apple to this day. And so Crush, the iPad Pro, sort of departed from that because if you look at what kind of message it's sending, it's like we're taking all of these instruments, these tools for creativity, and we're erasing all of that and just giving you this like nice, neat, kind of boring little slate of metal and glass. So I could see how people didn't take that well, especially in today's climate, because some of the critics have pointed to the advent of AI and how Chat GPTs slowly it's making inroads into the world of the creative arts. Nobody expected that. Nobody expected AI to come up with generative images with a few simple prompts. It was always like the conversation around Industry 4.0 and artificial intelligence was always about automating simple, repetitive tasks, but not some. It was 2 years ago. We didn't think about how 3 years ago it wasn't. The creative arts were largely assumed to be like safe against AI, and so all of these things have come together to create this perfect firestorm of Apple failing to read the room. But I am endlessly fascinated by how these sort of missteps happen because you'd assume there's a team of people come and there's an agency and there's the Apple's internal stakeholders, and within that agency there are different people that you know they're sounding off and they're thinking they're either agreeing or disagreeing on what they think about the ad. And so there are a series of not just one misstep, but multiple missteps going to leading up to go live. This is like you could do like a study about this, but like I said, this is like on a scale of 1 to 5. This is like a 1.5 at best. There are far more worse examples, and you can go into them if you'd like. But like,
Before we continue, Tim and Jess, have you seen the advert that Gustavo has mentioned? Okay,
Yeah.
you have. Initial thoughts.
So I'm the person that you would think I hate AI art. I'm like very open about this, and you've heard me say it before on the podcast. I'm like very anti AI art. Also, an artist who is an iPad user and does a lot of my art on my iPad. So you would think that I would watch this advert and go, that's really upsetting and that really bothered me. Actually, the thing that upset me was the things they were squashing on the hydraulic press were not satisfying at all. I love hydraulic press videos. I think they're great. And I feel like they went for this vibe of like, this is trending. We're making Dale's like having a nervous breakdown over just the Jess perspective. But, you know, they saw this trend and they were like, we're making the thinnest Apple product ever. Let's squish a load of stuff. And I genuinely think that what they were going for was all these things that you have, you can squish down into this one. The way it seemed to read. And I was really shocked by the backlash. I was genuinely like, I don't know why people are upset with this. Like, my housemate showed this to me and was like, why do you think people are upset? And I said, because it's squashing things and they're really not satisfying. And he was like, that is not at all what the backlash was about. Like, what? And I don't know. I feel like sometimes people make statements. I could also do a different statement and be sensitive and say, well, actually, I don't have space in my house for a massive piano. I can't afford a trumpet, but I can afford an iPad that can do all these things. Therefore, that's more accessible. So if we wanted to put a spin on it, and if I had to stretch my brain and be like, how could I be upset by this? You know, and be upset with the people who are upset, I could say, well, you're showing your privilege by saying that you can fit a whole piano in your house, like, whatever. I just feel like it wasn't that deep. Maybe Apple are known for the ads being deep, and so people read something into it that wasn't there because they're used to reading into Apple ads. Perhaps. But yeah, that's kind of my thought on it. I think everybody would expect me to be a hater, and I actually thought it was a good ad.
Yeah, I'm very curious. I wasn't expecting you to say that the items weren't satisfying enough. I thought you were saying like, what a waste of you know, this like classic stuff, and you know, I don't know how much of it was real. Probably all of it. They can afford whatever they want. Buy an antique piano and just smash it to bits. That's Apple. That's fine.
I wasn't expecting how satisfying each one was, how each crunch was, and my housemate was like, she's deranged.
It should have been like pencils and candles and the usual stuff that you see in hydraulic press videos.
Yeah, it was not good. Not good hydraulic press video. That's my review.
You wanted more destruction. Want to put the whole orchestra in there. Yeah, I kind of agree. I think it was an execution flub rather than a strategic or concept flub, because actually the idea of condensing the art into an iPad is kind of cool. But I think it's what it looked like was the destruction of the art and replacement of the iPad, which I think is the thing that people resonated against. And all of these things happen in context, don't they? They happen at a time when creatives are very sensitive to the value of their human created art. And they also happen at a time of massive polarization and people really sort of on the edge, ready to be upset about all sorts of things, rightly and wrongly, and people feeling very, I think society is quite sensitive at the moment. So I think if this happened a few years ago and, you know, there'd been no AI conversation at all, this may not have landed so poorly, but all of these things happen in context. And I agree with Gustavo. It's kind of interesting to see Apple row back on this. I remember when, remember the iPhone 4, when you couldn't hold it in a particular place or the signal cut out, and Steve was like, just don't hold it there then, you idiots. Like, that's a different Apple to this one, right? But we would expect that because it's got very different leadership. But yeah, it was interesting to see them row back on this, and I think it'd be interesting to see what their next ads look like and how sensitive and gentle and nondescript they are.
I could almost expect them to head more in that direction, just because it's like, you know, all press is press. Like bad press is good press too. It just gets you mentioned. Like people are talking about it, but my question is, who's actually complaining? Is it the right people? Is it just marketers and branding people and ad creative? Like, are they complaining about it, or is it the actual like target market they're trying to sell the iPad to?
It's the target market. It is definitely the target market from what I've seen, sort of in terms of the content my housemate was looking at, was all like people reviewing who would normally review tech products and artists and stuff. So I think it actually is the target market who is upset by this.
Interesting. Normally what I see on LinkedIn and other places is marketers complaining about marketing and never really the actual customers talking about it and complaining about it. So it's interesting to see that actually maybe they might be a united front on this one. But I could see them like going more into it and pushing the boundaries a bit more, because they've been known to in the past. Maybe, as Gustavo said, they could do with like leaning into it more. Tim, from an execution point of view, who do you think is actually pushing for this ad, like internally? I think a lot of their stuff is internal, so they don't use external ad creative agencies. So I don't know. Do you know much about how they operate?
I don't know about their setup. No, but actually, whilst Gustavo, while you were talking and you're saying like there's multiple teams who, all it would have taken was one person to raise a red flag. I can't remember the name of the book, but there's some illustration of, it's a fairly gruesome one, but someone was brutally murdered in a New York street, and there were lots of people watching. I don't know if you know the one I mean. And the question, it was maybe a Seth Godin book or something like this. And the question that the author asked was, why did nobody raise this as an issue? And the author posed that it was because there were so many people watching, it's always up to somebody else. And the takeaway was, if you're dying on the street, what you're not supposed to do is go, someone help me. You're supposed to point to someone and go, you help me. And I wonder if there's a bit of that here, where all it would have taken would be some incredibly strong personality to have final sign off, as Steve Jobs, to say either yes or no. And as long as they're reasonably calibrated to the audience, you should be okay. But because this was potentially a decision by committee, no one really felt it was their job to give final sign off. I don't know. I'm speculating on that, but that is a dynamic that seems to happen with bad ideas.
If you were in that team today, if you were like part of the system, would you have continued with it?
With that ad?
Yeah.
No. I think it was too open to interpretation, right? The 1984 ad, I can't see what other way you would have interpreted it. Whereas this one, I feel like it looks too much like destruction of the arts, which I don't think any company's like our corporate values, transparency, honesty, destruction of the arts.
There'll be one company out there that is exactly their values printed on the wall somewhere.
Yeah,
maybe OpenAI.
Sounds great.
Yeah, I'm definitely an outlier in this situation, and I think there's definitely going to be an audience there who just went, "Ooh, hydraulic press video," which is exactly what I did. But there's also plenty of people who obviously that has not happened, and they've really aired their concerns. So yeah, if somebody's watching and going, "Oh, well, that one person said that Apple did nothing wrong, so they did nothing wrong," don't listen to me. And listen to the others.
I think it's interesting because if you just reverse that video, the concept would turn out so much better. It's starting from a slate, this iPad, and then it blows up into all of these things.
Oh yes.
Yeah, can you believe there's all this in this tiny thing? You fixed it. You have fixed it.
Yeah. Play it backwards. Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, I was just thinking of like in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, where there's like the bubble machine and it's driving and it gets to the washer and it comes out the other side. You could just like, I don't know, be a little less violent, just squeeze it into this thing and mimic it, and then the iPad just pops out the end. At least a little less vibrant. Violent.
Yeah. I think the reason they did it, genuinely, I don't think there was that as much thought as we're like giving them credit for. I genuinely think they were like, hydraulic press trend, let's do it, and I genuinely think that was the thought process. And yeah, I think actually it was just, they were just like, let's make a little advert, and it doesn't need to be that deep. And then it's gone way deeper than if they would have made a more deep ad. I don't know. That's my theory anyway.
It's really easy for us to like potentially, I'm speaking for myself here, but like overanalyze it and think like, is this the first like public evidence that like everything at Apple isn't quite how it seems, and they've got all this AI stuff to contend with, and are they like panicking and not acting as they normally would? Like I wonder how like iPad sales are going. Like I don't know if they're up or down or.
It's interesting you said that, because the cynic in me thinks this is all like, this could be all deliberate to generate noise, but that's a very cynical point of view. iPad sales have been on a steady decline. That product has remained largely unchanged since it was first announced. Hardly any innovative new things that are happening on the iPad front. If anything, that whole line is suffering from a problem of fragmentation. There's like an iPad, the iPad Air, last generation's iPad, and the iPad Pro, and you're looking at all of these products, you're not quite sure what should I get from what's the best bang for buck. But yes, iPad sales have been on a steady decline. I actually wrote this down. So in 2023, sales were down 3% compared to 2022. The year before that, they were down 8% compared to the previous year. So that could be something there. It could all be just an elaborate play at all publicity is good publicity, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Fascinating. Right, so I imagine Tim and Jess, you have a headline each, but before you get to them, just want to remind listeners and watchers over on YouTube that you can get a free website marketing review by visiting exposureninja.com/review. Just give us all of your business details and your objectives for the year, and we'll tell you exactly what we think you can do to improve your fortune and hit those goals. That's exposureninja.com/review. Jess, what's your headline for this week?
So my headline for this week is about how The Ordinary pushing science in their ads over celebrity.
Tim, what's your headline for this week?
In AI Corner this week, we have OpenAI's latest release, GPT-4o.
Okay, I'm going to pick The Ordinary as our
300.
next story, and specifically because we're super delighted to share that The Ordinary have just become our newest partner, and we're delighted to be working with them going forward to help them with their incredibly ambitious goals, and there's some exciting stories hopefully coming to share in the future from that. So Jess, take it away. Tell us more about
just
The
to
Ordinary.
clarify, I did not pick this because of this new partnership. I genuinely thought it was really cool. And I picked it based on like positioning and how clear positioning can really make you stand out. So if you don't know who The Ordinary is, they are a skincare brand, and they're known for their really stripped back packaging. Like they don't have any like fancy names for their products. It's literally just like me trying to say chemical names. They'll say it's like niacinamide, or like, you know,
Yeah.
they'll say the scientific word, right? And obviously this can have its downfalls because then people might not know what these products are for, but they cater to this by having quizzes on their websites and making it really clear on the packaging, like you use this in the morning, or you use this at this step after you do this, and use before this and after this. And yeah, they make it really, really clear. I actually said to my housemate, I feel like they're like the Apple of skincare. And then he brought some. So obviously, yeah. But they're probably not squishing stuff on a hydraulic press, so let's not go back to that. So this has always really helped them stand out. And I think they've never really had to work with celebrities because the social media does it for them. Like user-generated content does it for them because they're really affordable. People can afford to try it, share it on social media and go, oh, this worked, this didn't, just for fun or just for views, rather than like with some other brands that are a lot more expensive. It's a lot more difficult to do that. But what I wanted to talk about today was a specific campaign that they're running at the moment. It's a out-of-home campaign, so it's on walls, billboards and stuff, where they're sort of addressing a few little comments that they've had, like maybe pain points. Like for instance, there's one big billboard that says, people find it odd that we don't name our products. We tried it once, but scientists are terrible copywriters, so we stuck with hyaluronic acid. Anybody listening who's in skincare, don't.
Hyaluronic acid.
Hyaluronic acid. Thank you, Tim. There's so many letters in that, you know, but we got there. So they're kind of trying to reinforce, like, you know, people like our products because they're good, not because we market them, you know, that we give them fancy names or we do this, that, and the other. Like they used to have one that was called like buffet, and they've changed that to just be one word. Because I got it. I think it was the niacinamide one. And I got that, and I was like, I thought I ordered buffet, and then I saw they've changed the name. They also had another ad that was like, people tell us we should work with celebrities, but we couldn't find one with a biochemistry degree, something like that. So they're trying to say like, we only want to work with people who are really authentic to our brand and like stick with that sciencey thing and really like lift us up in that way. And I just thought it was really cool. Like there is a lot of, you know, I can't remember which brand it is, but they've got Khaleesi from, I'm so sorry that I forgot her name, from Game of Thrones in, and she's like the face of it, and it's kind of just like, here's a person with beautiful skin telling you that this will make your skin beautiful. And for me, I'm like, oh, that's that person from Game of Thrones. Anyway, what's this going to do for me? Whereas I feel like The Ordinary, like, we're not adding any extra stuff, we're just giving you what you want. It does this. We're not charging you extra for branding or celebrity endorsements or packaging or anything like that. You know, it just does what it does. They also did a thing about how they'll never be chemical free because water is a chemical. So you're never going to be able to give people, you will just have to give you an empty bottle if you want us to be chemical free. And I thought that was quite cool. Like it feels like, as much as this campaign is a little bit sassy and it's like, oh, we're sciencey, they're also highlighting a lot of objections people have. Like they're like, well, we don't want to use your product because it's not chemical free. Well, actually, if you're using a different product that says it's chemical free, it probably isn't. That also, why don't you work with celebrities? Do you not have the budget? Are you failing? No, it's just we don't really want to because we'd rather rely on our science credentials. Obviously, you could argue the other side in that somebody probably wouldn't want to read all that text if they're walking by, if they're in a hurry in their car. Whereas if they saw an advert for like somebody with good skin and that product next to it, they might be more likely to go, oh, that's what that does. That's a skincare product. But obviously they know their audience. They're not necessarily wanting to achieve that with this ad. I just thought it was cool. Really, in summary, I thought it was cool. I thought it was different. I liked it. Every marketing website is talking about it at the moment and just how much they love it. So it's obviously struck a chord somewhere. And hopefully that same connection will be made outside of just the marketing community. Because sometimes we can run into this trap of being like, this is really cool. Like the reverse trap of what we were talking about with the video. It's kind of the same here. It's like, we think this is cool, but do consumers think this is cool? Time will tell.
Yeah. I think given the market that they're in, like trying to stand out in a slightly different way when everybody is also talking about like, this is from Laboratory L'Oreal and blah, 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 like trying to do it in a slightly different way that makes you stand out in this way, which I've seen these ads, they are pretty cool. I think that's important. Like to increase your market share, you have to do something a little bit different, and it seems like they're doing so. Tim and Gustavo, do you have any thoughts on, or have you seen these ads at all?
You want to go first, Tim?
Yeah, a couple of things. I really love The Ordinary's positioning, which is why we've always sort of referenced them in our video. I think there's something that really resonates about the fact that they are focusing on the ingredients rather than on the benefit. It's almost like the opposite of marketing, right? The sort of the textbook marketing is don't focus on the features, focus on the benefits. Whereas The Ordinary are like, well, the benefits are massively oversold in our category, so let's just focus on the features. And I think there's like an honesty that comes from that, which is really refreshing. I don't know if sometimes when I'm walking along, I see someone's face and I'm like, that's a really good idea for a face. Why have I not seen that face before? I feel like with The Ordinary, this positioning is such a good idea. I don't know why no one has taken this positioning in this category before. That's my first thought. My second thing that I really like about this is sometimes you see an ad campaign or even just a phrase which immediately recasts all of the other marketing and potentially even all the other products in a category in a completely new light. So you mentioned it there, Jess, about we couldn't find a celebrity that had a degree in biochemistry. The underlying thing there is it's not really relevant to just show some celebrity who happens to have great skin because, whatever, nothing to do with our product. And then, of course, next time you see an ad with a celebrity and you've got that in the back of their mind, back of your mind, or next time you see that, there's, I don't know, whatever. There's another example. I remember using a bottle of that Ecover washing up liquid a few years ago. And it said on the back, the reason this doesn't bubble as much is because we don't add artificial bubbling agents or whatever. I was like, all right, now all of a sudden, all of those other more bubbly washing up liquids now just seem like unnecessary chemicals designed to sort of manipulate my psychology into thinking that they're better and more concentrated, whatever. Like it immediately recasts, like we're triple filtered. Is another example. The vodka thing. It's like, well, everyone might be triple filtered, but now you're looking at all the others thinking, yeah, but they're not triple filtered. So I think there's like cool little hooks that you can throw into a campaign, which makes everything else look a bit rubbish or just shows it in a new light. And you don't have to be disparaging. You don't have to be negative about the others, but it's just a way of like educating the audience in your favor. And I think that's something this campaign does really well. So I love it. Love it. Really good.
It can be disparaging, but for fun. I mean, sometimes that might be what sets you apart. It makes you a little bit different. Yeah. The fact that you're quite happy to, take a poke at the other brands around you. I'm sure there are a couple that we can probably think of that do that repeatedly.
But I think they don't need to, and the science focus in this business is so strong, and I think that would be counter to the scientific. It's almost like a clinical, logical, sciencey. We're just focused on our thing and purity and clarity and honesty. And I think to start calling others out or doing comparisons or something like that might be a counter to that. It's like they'd be sort of dragged down into the mud, which doesn't seem very, very them. So
I just want to bring us back to like a point that I think Jess, you made in a previous podcast in the last couple of weeks about authenticity and whether the authenticity of UGC, this user-generated content of people doing their own makeup reviews, and this is my daily routine, I think has far more power than slapping somebody's name on it. Like, you can do that kind of work to expand your control of the market and expand your market share. But like, UGC is incredibly powerful, and should they seem like they're doing a fantastic job, because like the first time I heard about The Ordinary was through UGC content, and I don't use that kind of stuff. Like, it's not for me, but I still managed to find it because that kind of content does really well. Gustavo, any final thoughts on this one?
The Ordinary's positioning is interesting because it's predicated on this massive gamble, massive risk, really, that they're basically putting their money on taking a minimalist approach with their packaging. I mean, I use The Ordinary, but I'll circle back to that. So it's an interesting viewpoint. I'll give a breakdown of like how communication happens with brands like this. But it's interesting because they took a massive risk with minimalist packaging and anchoring their positioning on the proof is in the, what is the expression? The proof is in the pudding. But it's like, basically, here's the product. A product will speak for itself, that sort of thing. So it's a pretty big gamble, because from the onset of things, taking this approach means they're appealing to an audience that's fairly knowledgeable in skincare, which is where I come in, because every time I use The Ordinary, I ask my wife, what is this for? So it's always so I pick from her things of like a little stash of skincare items, and what is this for? And it all looks the same. It is kind of like, as Tim said, it's like the anti-marketing brand, at least in skincare, where everything is like, here's a face of a beautiful woman, you can be like her, which has like been done to death. The Ordinary is like the antithesis of that. But it's all back to Jess's point about UGC. It's also interesting because in communication, there's a theory called the diffusion of innovation, the diffusion of innovation theory. And it basically looks at how ideas or messages stem from its source and go towards a bigger population. And now in the past, old school marketing, the approach has always been like a celebrity or an ambassador, that sort of thing. That's where the message comes from the brand, then to the celebrity, then it goes to the wider public. But with brands like The Ordinary, where this is where the risk comes in. They're appealing to early adopters and people who are knowledgeable in skincare. They're fairly, if you could cobble together a profile off the top of your head right now, you can assume a number of things. They're fairly knowledgeable. This is not their first rodeo. They understand the ingredients, that sort of thing. They know things like parabens. What is a paraben? They know that. And what The Ordinary is doing here is they're appealing to this audience first, and they're taking this gamble that this audience, if they like our product, if they think our product is affordable enough, or they like our focus on the sciencey aspect of it, they'll be our biggest brand ambassadors, and we won't even have to pay a celebrity for it. And so that's where the diffusion comes from. It's influencers, beauty gurus, that sort of thing. And that's where the fusion happens. And then you start with the early adopters, then it goes all the way to like I guess you could say, the semi-advanced people when it comes to skincare, and then all the way to me, which is like, if this is like a ladder or like a staircase, this is what early adopters are, I'm at the bottom. It's like the dude who doesn't know anything about skincare but wants to look good anyway. So that's like how the diffusion of innovation happens. So it is a very interesting approach. I think they took a look at the room and said, everyone's doing the same thing. How can we stand out? But there are some I guess you could say, some disadvantages to that approach. If you want to, I mean, that shtick can only go so far. At some point, you're going to need to educate your audience, which is what the Ordinary is doing, by the way, on their site. They have this. It's like a knowledge base of like, here's what I don't know how to say it, hyaluronic acid does, or like, here's what niacinamide. No, I'm going to hurt myself saying these words, but like basically a knowledge base of what these do. So yeah, and so that's where the education aspect comes in, and yeah, to an extent, their ambassadors are doing this for I guess the wider public, but you need at the very least some kind of education pipeline or system happening.
I find it interesting that you mentioned the word like disruptive, because in a couple of weeks' time, we're hoping to bring out another video that is talking about disruption in the fintech industry, or specifically in banking, and how effective disruptive branding, disruptive marketing, disruptive business approach can really skyrocket business revenue, circumstances, all that kind of stuff. Hopefully we'll have a few more of those disruptive brands to talk about again in the future as well. So if you want to hear that, you're going to have to say subscribe to the Exposure Ninja YouTube channel. I think now it's time to head over to AI Corner. Tim, what have you got for us?
Welcome to AI Corner. So this last week, we're recording this on 14th of May. So on the first day of Google's I/O Developer Conference, where we're expecting more AI news to come. But last week, we were expecting OpenAI to announce their search engine product. So all the world's SEOs were sort of semi-excited, semi-terrified, waiting for our jobs to change yet again. They didn't do that. They pushed the meeting, they pushed the announcement back, and yesterday released their new model-ish called GPT-4o, O standing for Omni. And I'd say this is more of like an incremental update to the GPT-4 that we're used to powering ChatGPT. It can talk. It can sing. It can see live video. It's faster to talk to it, so you can actually have a sort of approaching real-time conversation. It does cool tricks, like you can show it your phone camera and it can tell you what it can see in the room. And it can, if you have two phones, they can talk to each other and it can have conversations. It can do text to sound, so you can ask it to make sound effects and it will do it. It basically does those sorts of things. And initially I thought, well, this is really disappointing. This is a very minor update. If you've got the ChatGPT app on your phone and you're a pro user, you've been able to talk to ChatGPT for quite some time now. And this feels like a relatively minor thing. But actually people online seem to have been really freaking out about this and are very excited about how magical it seems to be. I think one of the reasons that it seems to be getting traction is because it also has kind of fake emotions. So it can sound surprised. It's got quite a, I'd say, Californian flirtatious personality from the demos that I've seen so far, which make it quite fun and funny. And people seem to be responding to that. And I thought, right, great. So this chatbot's got fake emotions. How is this like an upgrade? It's not better at things. It's just pretending to be sort of flirtatious and a little bit weird. So why is this a big deal? But then I thought, well, the reason that ChatGPT got traction in the first place is because interacting with it was easy and felt kind of human. So it's almost like it's an upgrade to the interface. And an upgrade to the interface can actually be more significant than an upgrade to the technology because it makes us want to use it a bit more. So I thought that's kind of interesting, and potentially that's the story here, is that they're making this thing more engaging. They're optimizing it for engagement. I think the other big thing about this announcement is that they're making it free to use. So you don't have to be a paid pro user to use ChatGPT 4o. It's going to be available to everyone. This is going to cost OpenAI quite a bit of money, but clearly this shows that they are prioritizing spread and reach over profitability, which also kind of makes this an interesting announcement because it shows where they want this to go, which is really kind of mass adoption. So then it got me thinking, there's also a rumored announcement with Apple where OpenAI could potentially power the next generation of Siri on iPhone. And people were thinking, well, this is going to become the next sort of voice assistant on our phones. And of course, we will then be searching using this. And potentially then this, so what might appear like a sort of a minor interface upgrade actually produces quite a large behavioral shift in people. And potentially does this become the time when people actually start searching using generative AI? Is this the upgrade that actually makes Google's position as the number one search engine look slightly more under threat because it's so easy to use, because it's so personal, because it fakes emotion and sort of tricks our brains into thinking that we're talking to an actual personal assistant. So yeah, I think I find this quite a confusing one, because on a tech side it seems disappointing, but then on an interface thing, you can't argue with the fact that people are really freaking out and enjoying watching these demos in the same way that they did with ChatGPT. So it makes me think there might be something more to this than I'd initially thought.
I think if you're not a ChatGPT Plus user, a lot of this information will feel like new, and that's why I think there's a lot of like a lot of people online being like blown away by it, because some of it is just, unless you're like really into it, you're part of the 1% of people who are just like really die hard, you know everything. You probably won't have even known that voice was an option 9 months ago or longer. Gustavo and Jess, have you had time this morning to see any of the recent changes from last night?
I watched that video and I was traumatized. No, I wasn't traumatized. It was very strange, because I think as well, if you use Siri a fair bit, or any voice assistant that you have on your phone, you'll probably only use it for like the occasional like, oh, this is funny when you make Siri do this. But most of the time it's just for setting timers or asking for music, and half the time it just does whatever it wants. Like, I was having an argument with Siri in the kitchen and trying to get it to play a song. It refused, and then the Siri 2 rooms away managed to pick up what I was saying and play the right song. I was like, what? And so a lot of, the feeling towards these voice assistants is quite exasperated. So I feel like OpenAI are getting themselves in this door where they'll make a lot of money from these companies, but I think they're also putting themselves in a place where the everyday consumer will be interested in this, and it will pique their interest, and they'll be like, I'm gonna have a little go with this because this is really novel. Whereas before, I don't think, like, we feel like it's really popular because we're in a space where it's being spoken about a lot, but like, when I think about my family members who are like different ages, I don't think they would really be fussed about it. Whereas this, I can imagine them being like, hey, have you seen this thing? I feel like it's almost a marketing exercise, in my opinion. They're not trying to put out the most advanced, best thing ever, but they're trying to put out something that will grab the attention of the masses, in order to start getting them to use this ecosystem and maybe use the text-based stuff and that. But I feel like they're just trying to put something out to, be the first to have this video search, to have this voice search. You can show it your fridge and say, instead of just saying, what can I make with this? You can say, I need something that's going to get me through my run later. What in my fridge can help me? And that just brings this to this like whole new level, which just, blows my mind a bit. Yeah. But I thought she was too flirty. There was no need for that. Like, I felt a bit awkward watching the video. I was like, I feel like this is private between these two. Like, it was a bit much. It was a bit much.
I would say, like, with the capital investment they have behind them, if they were to just launch, if this was like day one, with the upgrade to the UI and the new desktop app and the interface and everything, if they went live with it now and put like mass advertising out there, it would blow people away. It would change the world. Like, people would be like hopping onto it overnight, in the same way that when Google was like really starting to expand from its initial time as a project at university to global attention. People are coming on like, oh, it's so simple and cut back compared to AOL or compared to Yahoo. Like, it's so simple, it looks really clean, and I just get what I need. If you see the UI that they're working towards today and the interface that they've added, this whole like omni-modal video, image, text, voice, whatever, and just that made that your default landing page instead of Google, I think mass adoption would be massive, way bigger than it is now. And if they just went onto the TV advertising and just showcased how simple a lot of this stuff is to use, a lot of people, like non-AI aware people, would pick it up overnight, because it is so simple to use. And if you haven't seen it, do go over to openai.com and just look at the videos. Like, some of it is really gimmicky, and Tim said earlier about there being cool tricks. A lot of it is cool tricks, but otherwise, not great. But like the main kind of stuff that a lot of people use Google for today, they could most certainly use on there. Gustavo, sorry, I haven't yet given you an opportunity to share your thoughts.
I guess depending on how bullish you are about AI, the flag there, it's not a red flag. I don't think it's a green flag either. So let's call it a purple flag, I guess, is that the product being offered for free. So you have a carrot and stick situation happening. So the carrot is that anyone can use this product. Now we've made it fun, and so the aim, I guess, is because you have a base of evangelists that love AI, they're bullish about ChatGPT and that sort of thing. And I'm guessing from OpenAI's perspective, next step from that, I guess, from for this product's life cycle is wider adoption. And the way you do that is to make it, to lower the barrier to entry a bit, make it, I mean, to us, for marketers and people who, I guess you could say, I hesitate to call them pros with power users of ChatGPT, just like a cringe term, but I digress. But like the main base of ChatGPT users, I guess, we see it as like gimmicky, but you have to remember the general public, they don't quite know how it works just yet. And so if they can latch on to all of these like little cool gimmicky stuff, then that's great. And that's how the stick here is for OpenAI to scour all of that data, all of those interactions between users, and that's just a way for them to even grow or evolve the machine learning algorithm even further. And so that's where the stick comes in. Tim said something, I forgot. I had a train of thought there based on what Tim was saying, but yeah, this is when it comes to disruption. I guess it always, if you look at like the most disruptive brands in history, there's always like a common pattern behind what they do. And it sounds a little cynical, but I think this is what OpenAI is doing as well. And so you look at a brand like Uber, for instance, when it first came out, it was a unicorn startup. Well, it's no longer a startup, but it was one of the few handful of unicorn startups, backed by venture capital, billion dollar valuation. When they first came out, what they did was Uber was very affordable, and it was marketed as this attractive, convenient, more importantly, affordable alternative to regular taxis. But then over time, and this is all a calculated move to eke out a market share, we'll starve out the other competitors, and once we reach a saturation point where we've maybe like hit 50% market share, that's where we jack up prices, and that's where we snuff out the competition. We've snuffed out the competition. Then it's time to make money. It's time to make our venture cap, the VCs, make the money, get them.
Airbnb is exactly the same. I know so many people who are like, I'm not going to bother with Airbnb because it's more expensive and worse than hotels now, and that did not used to be the case.
And if you look at, that's sort of like, I guess, where the trajectory of OpenAI is going as well. That's where they're trying to compete and gain a position against players like Google, Bing, and trying to produce a viable alternative to traditional search. So I don't know. It seems like that's the direction of things. Netflix is another example. They were branded as an alternative, a better alternative, a more cost-effective alternative to basic cable, and now they've come to a point where they're now offering paid. You're paying for the service, but now you're also getting ads, and so that's where things are. It follows a very similar pattern. These exciting new companies.
Yeah. There's a lot of interesting stuff ahead for OpenAI, that's for sure, and I think it's going to impact marketers a lot, but it's not the reason I'm going to pick it. In fact, I'm not going to pick it for this week's story to turn into tasks. I'd actually like to pick the story about the ordinary and doing things a little bit differently and being disruptive. So, Tim, I'm going to ask you first, because I know you might need to hop out before we get through the quick fire questions. Which task do you think business owners can take from this story about the ordinaries outside of house advertising?
Sheesh, this is a really difficult one. I feel like a lot of my advice to business owners in these stories is to be braver and to trust the marketing team. Honestly, I don't know if I'd have the guts to go with a campaign like this, or even to go with positioning like this. But that would be my advice: is to be braver, not Apple brave, destruction of the creativity, but brave as in, let's find something that's completely different. Let's do something completely opposite of everybody else. Let's go completely counter to it. And like Gustavo says, let's just take a risk. Let's take a risk that our audience are going to feel like we think they are intelligent enough to figure out these products for themselves and to see the benefits, even if we don't scream the benefits in their face. And if they do feel intelligent enough to buy these products, they'll also feel intelligent when they share these products because they are in on it. They are part of an exclusive club who understands it and can be trusted with this useful information. So, yeah, be brave.
Yeah, love that. Jess, which task do you think marketers can take from the story?
I think find a way that you could potentially test something like this if you're quite keen and you want to do something but you're potentially struggling to get buy-in for this. Find a way that you can test it on a smaller scale, whether that's on social media or one PPC campaign, or maybe writing a blog in a different tone of voice, or targeting a topic you wouldn't normally target that you could see would actually bring in quite a hot audience. I think give it a go, and then you'll have the stats to be able to say, actually, this is just not going to work for us. Or you'll have the stats to take to, whoever you have to go to get sign off and say, hey, I really think our audience would actually love this. Let's roll with this. So yeah, it's find little ways to test it first, because it can feel big and scary. And then we could do that, and we could take it to Tim, and then he will let us do out-of-home adverts saying Exposure Ninja only hires biochemists. I don't know where I was going with that, but there we go.
Love it. Sign off, Tim.
Yeah.
Amazing. Super. Well, Gustavo, I really appreciate you bringing your story this week. I'm actually going to ask you a couple of quick fire questions. Are you prepared?
Sure.
Amazing. Gustavo, if you had just 1 hour to improve your marketing, what would you work on?
1 hour to improve my marketing. I would. An hour? Jeez. I'd look at whatever data I have and sort of interrogate it. Just ask some hard questions. Am I doing the right thing? Does this data align with my business goals? That sort of thing. Does it align with my marketing objectives? Always go back to your data and try to see what you can take out of that. And try to approach it with fresh eyes. Actually, if you can bring in someone to interrogate the data for you, then that will definitely yield something in my experience.
Super. Gustavo, what would you do with an infinite marketing budget?
Oh, Super Bowl. You have like a return. I think you get $4.60 for like every dollar you spend on the Super Bowl. So I do that. I do all sorts of crazy things. I would run an experiment and like put together like an objectively bad product and see if I can market the heck out of it. If I can do that.
There's already those experiments going on, Gustavo. If you look at any of these AI pins that are out, they're definitely doing that experiment right now. So
yeah, and like not only like make noise about it, but like really move the needle, drive sales, just from pure marketing power alone. Like outspend your competitors and like see if we can grow your market share. But again, with an objectively bad product, and see if the marketing can do the hard work for you.
That'd be really fun to see. Gustavo, which marketing skill would you recommend that the 18-year-old Gustavo should work on, and why?
That's a good question. I think data analysis would be one point I'd like to focus on, maybe, because and that sounds like a very techie term, really. It sounds like a very technical look. You're looking at a dashboard of analytics and something, but really what data analysis is like just looking at different information, both quantitative and qualitative data. You sort of make deductive and inferred conclusions based on what you see. And I guess the big thing is to think like a scientist. Use a scientific approach to making connections between data, and
Do a little bit of data, can't even say the word, data analyst stuff over here. Gustavo, what are you most excited about in marketing right now?
Oh, I bet all the money in my pockets that people have said the most common thing is AI, right? I'm going to go out on a limb and say I'm excited for the direction of e-commerce, because do we still have time? We have time, right? So I'm just going to give you a quick history lesson here. So in Asia Pacific, where I'm from the Philippines, but in Asia Pacific, the trajectory of e-commerce was very different. So when e-commerce sites first became popular, the populations, big, massive groups of people, their first brush with the internet was through a mobile phone. And so these groups of people were on mobile first. for e-commerce, this presented some really interesting implications. One, e-commerce sites, because the reason I want to go back, so just, let me just back up a bit. The reason these countries were mobile first were due to a number of things, because of infrastructure. The way the internet infrastructure was set up was wireless, and so the main path to getting internet access was through your phone. So that presented some interesting things. People had phones, and what do you do on your phone aside from Facebook, Instagram, that sort of thing? You played games. That had an effect on how e-commerce sites in Asia Pacific approach the e-commerce game, and so there were a lot of more gamified elements, that sort of thing. And you see that. Does that ring any bells? That whole gamified experience, Temu.
Absolutely. Yeah, Temu was the first one that came to mind. Yeah, that kind of whole, get this before it runs out, or, complete this number of actions to get points. And yeah.
That spinning wheel is so annoying because you couldn't, there's no X button. But yeah, that Temu, as you know, is they're owned by a company based in China. And China is, for now, I think they're mobile only. They're not mobile first, even they're just mobile only. So that had, the reason I'm saying this is because we're seeing this sort of behavior with another subset, with another group of people, namely Gen Z. And so for younger consumers, their first brush again with the internet was through the mobile phones. In fact, there's been not research, but there have been multiple stories about how younger consumers, members of the Gen Z demographic, aren't very familiar with the traditional computer interfaces, like the file management systems of you see on Windows and Mac OS. I'm sorry. So they're not very familiar with that, but the way they navigate through technology is like everything's in a bucket. You put all your files in one bucket. That's going to have some interesting implications, I guess, for e-commerce, and you're already seeing signs of this happening, by the way, namely on places like TikTok, where things like, again, gamified things, like you say live shopping on TikTok. Admittedly, for now, it's like QVC on steroids. It's just like it's the products being marketed on, being sold, at least live on TikTok, aren't very good. So they're more like pillows. For some reason, every time I'm on TikTok, I get live sellers for pillows. It's like, I don't know what the data my user habits are telling TikTok, but I'm seeing ads for pillows all the time. It's like, putting me to sleep or something like that. But a number of brands are taking note of this. Brands like Uniqlo, they're investing in live selling, and the growth of live selling, at least in Europe and North America, it's growing upwards. But it'll be interesting to see how that pans out. I wouldn't say I'm bullish, but I am looking forward to how that pans out.
I can't remember the exact statistics, but I saw the other day that TikTok has had like 6 million people sign up for their e-commerce platform, like part of the platform in just the last 3 quarters. Like, there's certainly a lot of interest. It's interesting because originally they were going to shut it down because the whole like live selling thing wasn't working in North America, and they were like, we're going to close it. And it seems like it's flipped, and people are becoming way more interested. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that progresses. Okay. Gustavo, who do you think we should invite on to be our next podcast guest?
I would like to see, so we have a very fantastic dev and design department at Exposure Ninja. Some very talented people on board. I would probably like to see someone from dev or design talk about usability and the user experience, and how like page elements come together to drive conversions, like best practices of like, how do you write your H1, or where should your H1 be? Can you have multiple H1s? That sort of thing. Or like, can you cheat the system and have like a smaller H1, but you have a bigger H2 here because you want to use like for your H1, you want to have like a keyword focused H1, but you like bury it in the background. And then your H2 would be like its big headline that's more stylish. And can you do that? Is that safe? So there are multiple questions around usability that I think we can answer. It's just it's boring stuff to the casual observer, but I find that usability and UX, that's like exciting ground because it changes so fast. All these like best practices.
Yeah, especially when you're going across different devices as well, and it just changes everything. What might work for desktop doesn't work for mobile, and vice versa.
Exactly.
So, yeah, that's a great suggestion. Thank you very much. Well, again, thank you very much for joining us for this week's podcast. I hope you've enjoyed it. And thank you everyone for listening or watching. If you aren't yet subscribed, head over to YouTube and search for Exposure Ninja Dojo, or just head to the Exposure Ninja channel. You should be able to find us in there. Just hit subscribe and you won't miss an episode. Or you can go to exposureninja.com/podcast and you should get 300 plus episodes of digital marketing greatness by ourselves and especially Tim Cameron Kitchen. So again, thanks everyone, and see you next week. Bye.